I'm Michaela Parker, founder and executive director for the Academic Data Science Alliance. And I'm here to welcome you today to our career panel series. But before we begin, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about ADSA, or the Academic Data Science Alliance, in case you're unfamiliar. We are a community of data science researchers and educators who take responsibility for a just, equitable future where data science approaches are thoughtfully applied in all domains for the benefit of all. On this slide and on subsequent slides, there's a QR code that will take you to our website where you can learn more about our events, activities, and how to become a member. So with that, I want to again welcome you to our ADSA Career Panel series, where we demystify the data work behind a number of careers. And today, our moderator is Dr. Stella Min. Stella has a PhD in sociology, and she leads our career development network. So if you're interested in learning more about that community and potentially joining, please reach out to her. Her email address is on this slide, stella@academicdatascience.org. Or you can check out the CDN on our website. It's under the Members and Communities menu item. So with that, I will now turn it over to Stella to lead our panel.
Thanks, Michaela. Today, we're going to hear from Dr. Sam Fishman, who is currently a statistician for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration in the Department of Health and Human Services. We'll also hear from Dr. Laura Nelson, who is an assistant professor of sociology at the University of British Columbia, where she is the inaugural director of the Center for Computational Social Sciences. And then last but not least, we'll hear from very soon to be Dr. Daina Saras. She is the CEO and data scientist at Knowli, which is a women-owned research firm based in Tallahassee, Florida. Hi. So
thank you so much for having us, Dr. Min.
Yes, of course. Thank you for being here. I just want to go ahead and open up the mic to you all and invite you to share more about your current roles and describe what a typical day looks like. Sam, I wanted to start with you. How long have you been at your current role, and what does an average day look like for you?
I've been at SAMHSA for about 5 months, and so what we do on a daily basis, it's pretty flexible, frankly. I have been 4 days remote a week and then 1 day in person, but SAMHSA is switching. They gave the option and sort of pushed to having most people going full remote. So it's going to look a little bit different going forward. But generally what we do is you kind of flexibly work on your different projects, and you are supposed to prioritize the items that are most pressing, such as data requests, projects that we're working on with our consultants. And then more of your own work, that's sort of what you push back and you have to plan time around. And then we have meetings mainly with our own group, but also then with consultants. And then we tell, basically a lot of it, what we do is we manage the consultants, we review their work, we make sure they're doing what we ask them to do, and then we do our own work as well. So a good amount of it is review and quality control of the actual doers of the projects. And in general, our projects pertain to studying the treatment of substance use and treatment of mental health, looking at that just kind of at a demographic level in the United States. And mainly, I think what we do is we do kind of report writing, dissemination of data information, providing public use data for other researchers to use, and then sometimes we do some publications.
That's a lot. How about you, Laura? What does your typical day look like, and how long have you been in your position?
Yeah, so I'm I guess I would call a standard academic career path. I'm currently an assistant professor at University of British Columbia. Previously, I was an assistant professor at Northeastern University for 4 years. I've been at UBC for 2 years. And before that, I did postdocs. So I graduated with my PhD. I did a postdoc at Northwestern University, a second postdoc at the University of California, Berkeley, at the Berkeley Institute of Data Science. And then I got my faculty position at Northeastern and then moved to UBC. So, I'm in a sociology department. I'm not in a data science center or anything. So it's the standard 40% time research, 40% time teaching, 20% time service. So I teach computational courses. So I teach Python and sometimes R to students. I do research on using computational methods. So a lot of text-based data, and that's where the computation comes in. And then my main service, as Dr. Min mentioned, is I'm this new director of the Center for Computational Social Science, which is brand new. So we haven't really done anything, but just strategizing about how to build a computational social science center in the social sciences. So often they're housed in computer science or statistics, and we're trying to build it in social science. And so thinking about what that would look like if it's kind of grown from the bottom up in sociology, political science, econ, linguistics, even philosophy. We have philosophy in there. So that's the big kind of service center, and how I'm thinking about how to broaden computational social science in Canada and at the University of British Columbia. So research, teaching, service, it's the standard academic kind of career. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. How about you, Emily? Want to share your
Oh
day-to-day
gosh,
and your current
I was
position?
just thinking, yes, I was just thinking I might be a perfect foil for the standard academic trajectory. So, so my name is Emily, and I serve as the CEO of Knowli. So I'm a data scientist day by day. When I say CEO, I want to kind of clarify. So our company, I was, I think, the 5th employee about 5 years ago, and just to answer that question, I, had joined the company at a, after I had kind of finished my comps, and I had been working full time throughout my PhD. So I was excited to kind of transition to working in data science. So I was about the 5th employee or 6th, and we're now 22. So a lot of my work has been growing the company, as well as doing data science work. So I don't think it's a perfect 50-50 split ever. Today is I'm in South Carolina working with a Medicaid client that we have here. Let me just briefly share what our company does. So we really center on serving executive leadership in mostly state agencies or nonprofits that work in healthcare or the education sector. We really think about just folks that are working with institutional knowledge like Medicaid, Department of Health. We do social determinants of health research. And when we talk about tools, it runs the gamut from we work R, Python, Stata, SAS, SQL, to doing data visualization work in a lot of different platforms. Some machine learning, especially with really messy near real-time electronic health records data. And then we also do a lot of general decision support. And this is why I love sociologists who go into data science, because it's so much translational work, helping understand and describe what statistical processes are doing without having to get into the code with clients. So working with policymakers and other folks who are change makers in healthcare, understand their data, often collected billions of data points that folks who are really experts in policy just might not have the statistical expertise to know how to harness that data. So that's what we do.
Oh, very cool. Cool. Okay, well then getting into that a little bit more, and anyone can feel free to jump in here. What would you say was the most helpful in helping you prepare for your career? Anybody want to jump in there? Sam?
I'm happy to jump in.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. When I think about what is most helpful, I think of myself back when I was 18 and a first year at college, taking a calc class for the first time. And my professor told me, well, maybe you're just not a math person. And I believed that because of a first exam that just was a B and not an A for the next maybe 6 years until I took statistics again, thinking, oh gosh, I just got to do it for my sociology program, and learning, wait, I love this and I can do it. And it just, for me, what really has helped me is leaning into lots of new skills, as learning as many different programs as I can, getting mastery in some coding languages, and then knowing enough about how data processes work in others. We can't master everything, but just feeling comfortable working with data and making mistakes early on when it felt uncomfortable. I'm just so thankful for that. So taking advantage of any of those course options was a great first step for us. Yeah.
I think ideally you find a job that you fit well and that it fits you well. I'd say, for example, the current job I have, I think one reason why it fits well is my supervisor does a good job of task managing people to put them in tasks that they're good at. And so for me, she's like, oh, Sam has published a lot more things than a lot of the other people on the team has. So pertaining to things like publication or writing, like that's kind of something that he might specialize in more, or like the application of statistical analyses, rather than, for example, making me into maybe a capital S or capital D data scientist, and instead being like, he's a sociologist first, and then he's also a statistician in a sense too. So I think that's not necessarily, you only have so much control over that because you only have so much control over what you're actually doing for your job. But if you can find something that you actually match, it'll make your career much more successful, I think, make you happier. And also, I think knowing the speed at which you're supposed to work at work, and that definitely varies by the different type of job. That so I think in like government, doesn't work that fast, but there is actually like you can be rewarded for working fast. So people like that. I think in some other jobs, sometimes people don't want you to work as fast for different reasons. So it's like, it's a thing to know what, the pace you're supposed to work, how to match your colleagues, and how like rapidly responsive you want to be. And then, probably, I think in very bureaucratic jobs like mine, like knowing how to work through the chain of command within your team, so you're not pestering the person in charge. Instead, you're like going up through your task manager, and then because they kind of meant to talk to you more. So I think thinking about the speed at work and thinking about the chain of command, and then I forgot what I said first. Oh, and then finding a job that matches you and then you match them.
Those are all great tips. Thank you. How about you, Laura?
Yeah, so I've been on the job market multiple times. I've also been on the hiring committee, and I'm currently on a hiring committee now at UBC. So this is for like the disciplinary academic route. If you're going to a discipline, in my case, sociology, I think the two things that were most helpful for me and the skills that I see are valued on the academic job market is maybe like 5-6 years ago, you could use a cool tool and a cool trick on a large data set and wow people, but I don't think that's the case anymore. People now want some deep engagement with disciplinary questions. So take your disciplinary training seriously. I think some of the best training I got was social theory, my subfield courses that I took, because you really need to advance a sociological question, and that will make you more comprehensible to sociology hiring departments. Oftentimes they have no idea what data science is. They don't know what computational methods are. But if you have a strong question and you have an answer to that question, and then you happen to use machine learning on some complicated data to answer it, they'll kind of gloss over that stuff, but they can grasp onto the social theory, to the question you're answering. So really take that training seriously would be my tip one, is really get into your discipline, figure out what are the unanswered questions. The questions should be very exciting to you. And I know that's hard. Like, I'm not saying that academia needs to be a calling and your entire passion, but if you're not truly interested in answering the question you're trying to answer in your dissertation or your thesis or a paper you're writing, that's not going to get across to hiring committees, since we're talking about jobs. So find that question that's really interesting to you, and then that will come through, and hopefully you can answer that question. Or if you don't answer it, you can propose some further research or data you might need to answer it. It really is the best way to make you as a sociologist comprehensible to people on the job market. So take your disciplinary training seriously if you're wanting to go the academic route. Find that question or a set of questions that you really just deeply want to answer, and then learn a programming language, but not from a computer scientist. And I know that's gonna make me some enemies in the computer science department. But if you can learn it from a fellow social scientist, a sociologist, the way that we teach it is grounded in the way we conceive of data, which is different in computer science versus sociology. It's grounded in the way we think about evidence, which is different in computer science versus sociology, and the types of questions we ask. So you're going to learn different segments of Python from sociologists than you will from a computer scientist. Things like optimizing code or optimizing an algorithm may be useful later on, not when you're learning Python. You want to think about data analysis, data structures. So if possible, the third tip I have, and the most helpful thing to me, was learning a programming language as it's used in the social sciences rather than as it's used in computer science. And, I try to teach it that way. A lot of social scientists do. There are online tutorials if there's nothing available in your particular institution from social scientists. So there are material options available if nobody in your institution teaches it, but it's just, you just get a very different experience, and definitely a programming language is going to set you apart from other sociologists in your field. Again, if you're grounded in the discipline and then you layer on a programming language and some data skills on top of that, that is really the kind of sweet spot right now in the current job market moment that's going to get you a little bit on top of that pile.
That's all super helpful. If you have any resources that you want to share, I encourage you to do so in the chat for the students that are watching. So I guess related to this, looking back and knowing what you do now, is there anything that you would have done differently? Let's start with you, Laura.
What would I have done differently? I was learning computational social science kind of at a time where it wasn't a big thing, and it wasn't really taught. So I was piecing together an education through some online courses, through whoever was teaching it at my institution, UC Berkeley. That was often in the digital humanities. So now more often it's taught within social science departments. So if that had been available to me, I would have definitely taken those actual computational social science courses. It's just not available to everybody. Even today, it's not available. But that would have been my preference rather than me cobbling together. I don't think that the way I learned how to code was probably the best way. I just jumped in and started coding without knowing anything about it, really. So I would have liked to have a little bit of a better foundation of thinking about literate coding and proper coding and all that. So that would be the big thing, but we don't always have choices. So whatever gets the job done. But that gets back to my recommendation that you learn a programming language from a social scientist.
Do you have any recommendations for students who don't have a computational social science course at their school?
Code Horizons is doing some really great. I think it costs money, but oftentimes you can get professional development funds from your institution. So Code Horizons for me I've seen is some of the best kind of extended long sessions to learn coding. There's been some other ones, and I know there's been some controversy, so I don't want to recommend one that's kind of under controversy now, but I've tended to like Code Horizons a lot as a resource.
Okay, thank you. How about you, Emily? Knowing
Sure.
what you do now, is there anything you do differently?
Trying to live with no regrets here, but I think one piece that we haven't maybe touched on as much is feeling ready and permission to play with messier data earlier in my graduate school trajectory. So, we work with near real time, real as in entered by a human into a computer, Medicaid data on a massive scale every day. And it's never going to be clean in the same way that when you download that sweet data set for your maybe thesis project from, established and reputable resource, it's pre-cleaned. And it's very different than cleaning for maybe a course project. I know I'm speaking to the crowd here, but it is really something that I think folks master when they do it a lot over a long period of time and experience the different kinds of, when I say messiness, it doesn't even necessarily mean it's wrong. It's just not pre-cleaned for you or verified by somebody else, and just really getting to know what kinds of tendencies you tend to see with errors in data because of human entry or things like that. That just is really good practice. But I really appreciate what Dr. Nelson has been saying about learning data science. You know, I won't even say exclusively, but there's so much to be gained by learning from a social scientist, because again, you're tied to answering social questions and not just, yes, I made you the table that you asked for. So really, you know, getting to play earlier with messier data in my grad school experience. Again, I know it's hard to access a lot of these data because of HIPAA or other privacy things, but you know, raw survey data from an original survey is a great way to start, so you can see how things look when they come in.
How about you, Sam? Knowing what you do now, is there anything that you would do differently?
I think I would have ate more Lucky Charms. I got more 4-leaf clovers in my life to carry around so that I didn't finish my postdoc in 2021. But not sure that's really in my control. So don't time things with the global pandemic or a great recession. That's probably not good. So that would be one thing. I think working in like a federal government job is definitely a better fit for me than working in consulting that I did for a year. So knowing that more like completely, it would have been nice if I just knew that ahead of time. But I think that the atmosphere works better, the way I think the work operates and the priorities operate fit me much better. I think consulting leans a little bit more towards like, I would say like capital D data science and like very, very technical work. Whereas I think in the government, it tends more towards management of work, review of work, thinking a little bit bigger picture, because we tend to tell consultants what to do. So my experience is definitely like I've been on both sides, and like being on the client side is much more enjoyable to me than being on the consultant side. So I think, you know, it's good to know both, but now I know that this is what fits me better, to be on the client side. I think just having like a good identity, if you end up leaving academia temporarily or for long term, like knowing what you actually want to do, and like if you don't want to be like a capital D data scientist, to really know that, and to not pursue a job that will try to make you into one, even if they don't say that. Like they might say it, they might not, but like I think a lot of the time in consulting, because there's more of a technical emphasis, there may be some level of push to be a data scientist more than a social scientist. Whereas I think if you work in federal government, it's much less likely you will be asked to turn into a data scientist if that's not what your job is described as to begin with.
Interesting. Thanks for that. Well, I guess going back to your current jobs, was there anything that you found to be particularly helpful in preparing for interviews for your current positions? Emily, do you want to lead us?
I don't mind at all. So I do want to share that this opportunity was when I first joined Knowli, it was something that it wasn't an opportunity that I had maybe applied for in the standard way. I had been referred for the opportunity because of a previous role. So I'm going to rewind back a little bit from when I went from a first, student-facing student services job in academia to doing data work. What really helped me in these interviews was being able to show them with, whether at the time I was able to access some really clean, easy, de-identified data that we have at the institution, and to be able to show and be able to speak to the kinds of questions I knew that they were asking. I think from my perspective, since we're so focused on serving executive leadership and informing policy and thinking about outcome improvement, I really studied up on what the institution was trying to achieve at the time. I worked at a university, and really thinking what kinds of questions they wanted to answer, thinking through with my limited understanding at the time, what kinds of data I knew they were collecting. Really, I'm going to be honest, we do real fancy statistical things, but often the things that have most power are clean, pristine, and well-interpreted descriptive statistics, like very basic, but very accurate interpretation to inform a decision. I know I've gone down a rabbit hole, but kind of bringing it back here in prepping for interviews for that first role, it was showcasing that I had translational power. And I think when I say translational power or skill, I'm just thinking about what social scientists are trained to do is take data and really interpret it for, no, not just a lay person or, for my mom to understand what my PhD dissertation is about, but a decision maker to make an informed decision. Yeah, so that kind of practice really helps.
Do you have any tips for how students can practice these skills?
Okay, sure, absolutely. So I'm going to stick with the university context. But if you are thinking about any of these kinds of, I'm going to say institutional research, and I say that you could at a hospital, in a government position, literally any kind of institution, I would go and check out what they have public facing. That doesn't mean it's the truth. I'm not saying people lie, but like it might be dated data, it might be just verbal description of metrics or outcomes or things that they're watching. But I would go scour websites and see how they communicate about things that we would consider data. How do they communicate about improvements or declines or increases? Just really seeing how how the comms team, and data folks, and researchers all work together at the institution to tell a story. Not meaning that it is a fake story, but how they communicate about what they do. Really equipping yourself with that, and then thinking, where would they get that data? Is that a patient survey, a student survey? Is that an electronic health? Where those things would come from? But just kind of creative brainstorming will help you when thinking about answering questions about how you would approach solving a problem.
Great, thank you. How about you, Lauren?
That advice goes for academia as well. So there's 2 stages to academic hiring. The first is to submit your application. So you usually have to write a cover letter or research statement. And that kind of what you need to present yourself there is different if you do happen to get to the next stage, which is either a online interview and then maybe potentially a campus visit. So in the initial stage, your kind of research, your statement of interest or your cover letter or whatever they're asking for, that first paragraph is key. You really need to get forward what are your subfields, like who are you as a scholar in that first paragraph? What are your sub-interests? So are you a social movement scholar or culture? That needs to come through very clearly. What is your dissertation topic? And very succinctly, like the tweet version of your dissertation, like what is the question you're asking and any interesting findings. It used to be that you really need to get forward who's on your committee, is particularly your chair. I would say that's still probably important to list your chair in that first paragraph. So you want all that information in the first paragraph. And then in the rest of your statement of interest, and even in your research statements and teaching statements, I would use subheading or bolding for the keywords. You really need to allow the committee to kind of skim your statements and be able to key in on who you are as a scholar and the contribution you would make. But as Dr. Saras was saying, you also need to connect to the—
not yet, this spring.
Oh, sorry, soon to be. Okay. Yeah, so you also need to do research on the institution you're applying for. And I know that's like a big ask because often in academia, we're applying to 40 jobs at the same time. So in that first stage, it can be fairly superficial. Just what are there research clusters in the institution that you would connect to? What are some of the basic ways you can connect to the institution? I'm in Canada now, and this has been an interesting experience because people in their cover letters who don't even acknowledge that Canada is a separate country really get dinged in that initial phrase, because it's just like, yeah, we are a different country. How would you connect to Canadians? So if you're applying to a different country, just acknowledge that, right? I'm applying to the UK, Ireland, Canada, and this is how my research would translate to that crowd. So basic things, this is that first stage where you're submitting your application. Just indicating that you're not just mass sending out these letters, but it actually is somewhat tailored to the place you're sending out. It really actually makes a huge difference. So the little bit of research you can do to just say, yeah, you have a research cluster on social movements. I study social movements. I would fit nicely in that research cluster or whatever. If you do get that amazing campus interview, you really do also want to connect to the department and understand what are the courses that they need teaching, which is often listed. So are there intro courses, stats courses? Like departments love it if you can teach some of the core courses. So what are the core courses you could teach? A research methods course, social theory, whatever it is. Like talk about that in your interview, what courses you would want to teach, and you like really connect with the institution. If you get that campus invite, put in the work to find out who's in the department, what are the areas, how would you contribute to the department, find institutes across the university. So like, is there an institute on data science, on computational social science, whatever your subfield is, and mention that in other places. Being on these hiring committees, it makes a huge difference. So get forth who you are as a scholar, what are your subfields, and then connect to the institution. You just really can't do these kind of mass applications, even at the first stage. And sorry, it takes time, but it will make an impact even in that first stage.
Thank you. How about you, Sam? Do you have any tips on the government side?
Okay, yeah, so I have, as I said, had also worked in private side as well. So I think similarly to what Laura said, to correctly tailor your applications, the federal application is pretty distinct. And it actually does allow you to kind of mass send things with some minor modifications, but it's a very long application and it's very different in its goal than private sector resumes are and cover letters and academic ones. So the goal is more, it's going to be reviewed by HR. So it's important for like keyword usage rather than it is to actually mean anything. Like it literally doesn't actually have to mean anything. You can almost copy and repeat across the different jobs as long as you use the right couple sentences at the beginning. But you do need to nail the keywords. And the HR people will not actually understand the job most of the time, but they will understand keywords. So they want you to hit them. And I would say, like, interestingly, I think federal government might value, like, they value your coursework more than maybe some other areas. So like having, like, naming the courses specifically, like I took a structural equation modeling course. That's pretty helpful if that's something they want. I think name value of institutions matters a lot for federal jobs, which might be surprising, but like, I think me being connected to UNC and to Duke, like, it definitely gives a leg up because for whatever reason, they seem to notice name value, and I'm not sure really why, but I think it's probably an HR review thing that they're not really thinking, they're not experts on it, so they're not going to be able to like interpret a data science kind of explanation. They just want to see something as quickly as possible and be like, oh, you could do this job. You signal these things hard. So yeah, that's definitely, like, the federal resume is very different. The goal is very different. So that would be the first thing. And then I think in the federal side, definitely it's less competitive, more collaborative than in private sector from my experience. For example, like, you're not fighting anyone for promotions. You will just be promoted. Everyone will be promoted like one level at a time for sure every year, as long as you don't like do something so egregious that you like get demoted or fired. But everyone will increase. And then like your own review process is quite independent of your colleagues' reviews. So like that is something to think about, that like definitely people prefer collaborative colleagues in the federal government. I would say definitely appearing to be too externally competitive would not be the greatest thing in an interview for a federal job. It's not something that's really encouraged. It's not something that's really that beneficial. I mean, you want to be like ambitious, but definitely that's a major change from private versus federal. I think this advice would apply to federal and private, but if you have a lot of peer-reviewed publications, you might think like, oh, it might not apply for a lot of these other jobs. They actually apply quite well as long as you have completed them. So a lot of these jobs, they really like you talk about finished products and what it means. So that applies for private and for federal. You can say, I started this project from the beginning, maybe name some difficulties you overcame, like For example, in I think the publication that I'm most proud of, I was given a very difficult review, and a lot of people said like, oh, I don't think you can actually do that. But the fact that I figured out a solution to actually do this rather vague thing that they wanted that people didn't think I could do is a good kind of thing of saying I overcame some obstacles that were pretty substantial and people doubted that it was possible to overcome the obstacles. Or something like I had a paper that like we kept on getting rejected, and then the first author, who was one of my mentors, he kind of gave up on leading it and he decided to have me lead it. So that meant I had task management experience leading people across institutions. Like they like that stuff in federal government, and they like that in the private sector as well. I think especially if your job is very review heavy in federal government, if you know that well, like if I were to have an interview at SAMHSA again or interviewed at NIH or something where we were doing a lot of review work and reviewing consultant work, I would think I would mention like task management knowledge and knowledge about reviewing, maybe talk about reviewing journal articles, because that's one of the most comparable skills that we like that to what half my work is now, except I think it's a little different, but it's definitely comparable. A little like that's a little bit less nitpicky, but it's definitely similar. And if you end up in some kind of science officer job, I think it's definitely even closer. So, if you're in grad school right now, you're getting some journal article reviews, you should probably do some of them. I think that's a pretty useful skill. A very underrated skill, because you're not rewarded for it much in like becoming an assistant professor, although you're expected to do it for sure, but like 100% as a federal employee, you're doing almost that more than anything else.
So Sam, you're also attempting one of the rare transitions of going back into academia. Do you have any tips for anyone of what that is like and what you have found to be the most helpful so far in doing that?
You got to keep on publishing. So if you can like slow down your rate of publishing and save those projects so they trickle out later, if you're a postdoc or something, that's probably a good idea. Like don't get all your stuff out. If you're gonna leave and come back, you better have an overwhelming amount of stuff.
Yeah.
So that you can like compete with people who are continuing to do stuff and then blow away the competition, because you're at a disadvantage coming back in. I mean, it's super competitive. Like last year, I was a finalist at one job. I was the backup, and like I had 13 publications at the time with like an AJS paper, and I got beaten by someone with 15 publications. So I didn't feel bad, but like it was like, yeah, that's pretty difficult. And it wasn't like at Princeton or something. So it was, it's difficult. Yeah, I think I would agree with Laura about tailoring I don't do it in the same way that Laura does it, but like tailoring your application is pretty important. I write a lot of stuff about their mission statement. So I mentioned the mission statement in every single written document. I take it back there, which I think at least shows I tried. I don't know if it means anything, because I don't know if the mission statements mean things. They might not. But like, it means I looked, and it means I tried. I think public schools like that you mentioned caring about public schools, caring about the well-being of the state, because that's often in the public school charter. So that is worthwhile to do in every public school application. Say, oh yeah, I value public education. I think diversity is beneficial for the economic well-being of the state in your diversity statement. Like whether or not you think that's really the reason why, like they have to think these things as a public university. So to show you're along with their goals, like if it's a religiously affiliated university, to show you're getting along with those goals as well. Maybe you don't have to say that you agree, but you have to show that you're on board. Yeah, I think like probably make sure you don't be lazy on the diversity statement. Like, actually had Stella look at mine, and she gave some good feedback. So I didn't try hard enough first time with the diversity statement. So I think that trying a little bit harder, and that helps. Yeah, and you got to get pretty lucky, frankly. And if you can leverage, I don't know. I mean, when you go to the interview, definitely, the first round and second round, be excited, be all in, be like, I want to be here. I want to be here. It's unique. It's perfect opportunity. Don't be hedging your bets or something. That's not going to work. You can do that a little, especially federal jobs. You can definitely do that a little bit. You don't have to be like, oh, I love the census. I always wanted to work for the census, and it's my dream job to be at the census. They will likely give you a job, whether you say that or not, if you fit the role. Oddly, I think the private sector, you might want to do that more, somewhere in the middle there. But yeah, so those would be the things I think of right now. Yeah, so we'll see. Fingers crossed, I guess.
Yes, good luck.
Just some practical, very practical nitty-gritty advice for I've spent my entire life in academia, so I can't speak to the industry side, but in academia, create a website now if you're a grad student or if you're trying to go on the job market. Really, you have to be Googleable. So committee members will look at your application and they will Google your name. So your website should pop up. Create a Google Scholar account that the first time you have a publication and sometimes even working papers get cited on, if you have it on Archive or Social Archive, you can create a Google Scholar account. So create a Google Scholar account and don't worry about looking bad. You just need one so that we know you're a scholar and you're a person. Sam was mentioning reviews. You can create it used to be oh gosh, I don't know what it used to be, but they got bought out by Web of Science. So you can create a Web of Science account and that lists the reviews you've done, verified reviews. You wouldn't normally submit that for any academic position, but it's there to just say, here are the journals I'm reviewing for as a record of what you're reviewing for. If you have code, if you write code, create a GitHub account. This sounds like a lot of work. It's not all that much work. Just creating a Google Scholar account takes minutes, but it is so important. Even a basic website. And if you're going to create a website, you can have here is what I would look like to an academic audience. And then you can have a tab that would be more speakable to an industry audience. So skills, translational work, just ways that you could sell yourself there. And I guarantee you it's worth any amount of time you put into your website. It's worth it. So yeah, I know there's a lot on everyone's plate. I know everyone is overworked, but that can't be the thing that falls through the cracks.
I think one recent bit of advice I got from Tyson Brown, who's a professor at Duke. He said, if you're in your job talk, when you're talking about your future research, he's like, promise big, go big, don't go little. He's like, when I said I'd apply for an R01 or R03, he's like, don't say R03, R01. Say you're going to do crazy things. Say you're going to do big things. Don't be like, I'm going to do a small thing. No, he's like, go say you're going to get Chetty data. Go say you're going to do this. You might do it. And yeah, you want to be impressive. Don't go halfway in. On the other hand, for a federal job, don't do that. Don't do anything like that. They would think you're crazy. You're not going to do that. You want to show you're a good colleague. You're going to do your job correctly. Don't be promising the world. They'll think you're insane and not hire you maybe. But yeah. Oh, and definitely practice your job talk over and over and over again. And they will have I had an interview at Research Institute last year, and I had a very similar job talk to an academic job talk. So practice that over and over and over again. It also may help you if you ever decide you want to do stand-up comedy, because I've done that a little bit and it's actually pretty similar. And Stella's been to it, so she knows that
it's really good.
it probably helps. So if you ever just get an inkling, job talks will help you out. So practice.
These are all really great tips. I'm going to turn real quick to an audience question. So the question is, each of you are working in different industry, and it shows how versatile our sociology degree is and our research focus can take us. What is your work-life balance like is question 1. And question 2 is it what you expected? And question 3, how often do you meet, how often you meet with and how many people you collaborate with regularly at your job?
These are great questions. I can jump in quickly. So what is my work balance like? I think I can be honest here and say that my work-life balance in Canada is very different and better than the US. They approach work differently in Canada, academic work, than in the US. And it's been a really actually almost a sigh of relief to come to Canada. They're not quite so productivity focused. You can take breaks, which also means that things slow down. So if you're trying to get bureaucratic stuff down, it takes a lot longer than it would in the US. But it's been really nice to have that type of work-life balance in Canada that you don't get in the US. US can be, at the top institutions in particular, it can be a bit brutal at times, and they don't respect that work-life balance as much, but Canada has been wonderful. So if you're in academia and you don't mind going north of the border, I do recommend Canadian institutions. They like American trained academics, and it's a really wonderful, friendly place, and it offers a really nice work-life balance, in my opinion. And I've been at multiple institutions in the US and just one in Canada. Let's see, I do collaborate a lot. As a computational social scientist, I think we collaborate more than perhaps ethnographers or other types of sociologists. So I meet with students quite often, which is really nice. I have a lot of students working for me. I have 2 postdocs working for me right now and a couple grad students. I meet with them regularly. I'm a co-PI on a large NSF grant, so I meet with the co-PI quite regularly. None of them are at my institution, so it's a lot of Zoom meetings. I'm trying to build up some collaborations here, but yeah, I have my own work, but I would say 50, more than that, 60% is collaborations, maybe 40% is my own work in my role, but that is very individualized in academia. You could go all in on the collaborations, or you could go all in on the solo work. So that is not, nothing is imposed there. It's very, very individual.
I could jump in. I'll start with I'll start with work-life balance first. I do not have good work-life balance, but this is a very chosen choice at this time. I'm growing a small company. So we've gone from one major contract in Florida in the last 5 years, kind of under me, to working in 5 states with like their major Medicaid programs or their departments of health, like large contracts. So I'm aware that I'm investing a certain kind of effort and energy. It also does really, it really helps too that I do have a very collaborative job. And I would say it's collaborative within our own team of data scientists, but also really collaborative with our clients. So it might be different than the typical kind of consulting experience. We do a lot of rapid response data science work. So I think my enjoyment of any kind of work-life balance ended during COVID, especially during the true first 6 months of emergency when there wasn't much preparation. One of our clients kind of pulled us very close into kind of the COVID data science and reporting work for the state because there was a competency gap to really be able to handle it in near real time. So learning from that experience, I at least know that for me, I know how to set things up for the folks that work on our team to have a 40, maybe occasionally max 45-hour work week, and how we've built in balance for the folks that are now working for the company. I will continue to be a bad example, but I promise you I have plenty of fun to make up for the intensity of this work. But again, this is kind of blending sociology and data science, or social science and data science, with also business development work. So there's definitely an element of hustle, and I like it. So it's okay with me.
So in terms of work-life balance, I would say working at SAMHSA is amazing. It's about the best job you could ask for in terms of work-life balance. I have a big plug for working in the federal government if that's a priority to you. And People, if anyone tells you that the pay is not enough, I think they're wrong. I think you move up pretty quickly as long as you try to move up quickly. And more of these jobs are going remote. My organization just recently said, because of competition with the NIH, I think, because they just went remote for most of their jobs. And so in order to compete with NIDA, the most comparable organization to us, they basically, at least that's how I think it is, they gave us all the option to go fully remote, which means you don't need to be in the DMV or the DC metro area to have a lot of these federal jobs now, which is a big change. So yeah, big plug for the federal government. My friends in other federal agencies tend to be very happy with their work-life balance as well. You're not, so this is, I worked in consulting before. I know a lot about other consulting jobs. I've been received offers from other consulting jobs. I've talked to a lot of people about it. It varies considerably, but again, this is difference between the client and the consulting side. So you might technically work the same amount of time, 40 hours a week, but federal government, we are required to take a 30-minute lunch. We're required to take 30-minute breaks. We can pare down your lunch if you want. People don't watch every minute you're doing of the day. That's not what they do. They don't really care. That's not, the federal government is not going to monitor you to monitor your productivity. That is not something that people do. Whereas in consulting, that's often what happens. You are logging every 15 minutes of the day. At some, I think especially some of the more prestigious places,
Exactly.
you are logging 15 minutes a day, but you're really working more, but you're just hiding that time. And it really depends there where you're at. Like, is it nonprofit or is it for profit? So that's a big difference. And whether people are like not pestering, but like, get this done right now. And what right now means very different from the client side, federal government versus being in the consulting side. So like for us at SAMHSA, it's like get it done now is probably like get it done by the end of the day or by tomorrow. Whereas like I think on the consulting side, sometimes it's on like get it done in the next 10 minutes or next half an hour. So it's a big difference. I think it's a lot less stressful from my experience, but you are in turn managing or helping to manage the consultants, and that can come with its own level of frustrations. But yeah, definitely a plug for the federal government. Like below a GS-14 level in the federal government, it is more relaxed than working in equivalent consulting jobs. Probably still relatively more relaxed relative to equivalent consulting jobs at GS-14 and above, but it does get more intense GS-14 and above. There's a big jump from the GS-13 to GS-14 level, which you will not see before then, I think. So that's the thing to think about, the level you're going to be on. But yeah, and again, just to say that the work-life balance is good. You also like you get a pension. So if you add in the pension, you add in the benefits. We get a bigger 401k than you get in consulting jobs. So it's like there's like 13% deducted from my salary for those things, including the pension. And someone in my work who'd been there forever, he like as a good demographer, he calculated it all out, and he's like, yeah, I make more money than I would have made as a consultant because of the pension. So you don't have to think that like government is sacrificing one for the other. I think you're probably ending up about the same as most consulting jobs, except for some of the ones that pay the most that are geared towards social sciences. So that's my plug. In terms of how many people I collaborate with, it's kind of hard to say because we have meetings with like 20 people sometimes. And I don't know if they really count because I don't really work with our consultants directly that much. But if you want to count every individual consultant that I see in a Zoom meeting, it'd be like, I don't know, 70 people technically, but that wouldn't really be very accurate. I think it's probably more like 6 people that I actually directly work with. Maybe 6, 8, 10 people. And it's generally the same people. Like these big federal contracts, they don't like change things that much. They're pretty consistent. They're not like firing consultants left and right. So the contact people are about the same usually, and it's pretty consistent. But again, I would say thing to note as someone who could be interested in federal government and being on the client side is very different being on the client side than the consulting side. The amount of power you have on the client side, even as me, a GS-12, who's like, that's a middle level person, is quite a bit higher in these interactions than you do have on the consulting side. Like I was amazed moving over how much influence even I can have. And I can tell a pretty high up person in the consultant what to do, as long as I get the approval of like task manager, supervisor types, which they will generally give if they think I'm doing things correctly. So yeah, that's a really important dynamic to think about, how you want to be treated on a daily basis, how much you are okay with being told what to do, and over and over and over again, to like dot these I's, dot these T's, don't use the word while to begin a sentence. Like as a consultant, that is your job, and you will be told that even if you are a really high level employee for a long time. So it's worth considering how the power dynamics of the collaboration and who controls money.
Okay, well, we're running up here on time, so I want to thank everybody for coming. We still do have one more audience question that I just now saw. So if you want to stick around and ask your questions directly to the panel, please do so. But for anybody who needs to leave, thank you for attending and thank you for your time today. Okay, so to go back to the question is, do any of you have any advice for students hoping to have options in academic and applied arenas? So if they wanted to just have options available for both, like what would be the best areas to specialize in, like skills wise or research wise? And then also, I think this question was asked by Javante. If you want to elaborate on your question, can Mike, if you can unmute everyone who has stuck around so that they can ask questions.
Well, you basically got the gist of the question. You know, I wanted to know about skills, or you know, what kind of experience would translate between, you know, both applied arenas and academic arenas. And it sounds like publications are also considered in more applied arenas. You know, but would it be possible to get a job in the academic arena with plenty of experience and expertise and knowledge, but not many publications? You know, just things like that. What kinds of things should we be working on that would make us competitive, you know, in both arenas?
Anybody want to jump in?
Like Sam would probably be the best person to answer this. I do want to, well, I've never applied to industry jobs, but I know that there's some caution about hiring PhDs in some industry jobs because we tend to take a long time to do stuff. You know, we write a dissertation for years. In sociology in particular, it takes us years to write our dissertation. The publication timeline in sociology is quite long. It's not like months, it's years. And that, I've heard, can make some people in industry a little nervous. So anything that you can show that you can work under a timeline, a deadline, that you can meet, you know, that kind of, it's not, you can finish projects, as Sam was saying, like, yes, I can finish this thing. I can actually give you output. I can make nice graphs. I can do it what you want. Visualizations are great, by the way. If you have visualizations you can show that are really nice, academics love it, industry people love it. It shows that you've worked with data. It shows that you've been able to manage data and you can do an output. I used to kind of poo-poo data visualizations, and I thought, oh, I'm not a data visualization person, but now I focus on them a lot. Even submitting to publications in academia, they can psychologically impact your reviewers. So if they see like this really nice polished visualization, they're going to be like, oh, this is good. They thought about this. They're paying attention to detail. And if it's just like the standard Python standards data visualization output, that will affect the way a reviewer sees it. And it's like this weird trick. So spend time on your visualizations. If you have a really nice one, if you can make it a little interactive, post it on your GitHub, on your website, like that can make a weird, strong impact on people.
I can offer to
Yes.
that same side of the coin of, I am not the person to be able to say what will best prepare you to succeed in the academic job market. And in part because I think really when it comes down to then your specialization and what kind of jobs you're applying for, it can be really tricky. I can't offer expertise there. But in terms of if you want to keep the private sector / industry / nonprofit sector open, really similarly to what Dr. Nelson is saying, is having examples that show that you did something besides the point click and use the standard data visualization. For me, when I say that somebody has made data visualizations, and often folks send them along with their cover letters, I'm looking to see, did you just take maybe some of the most obvious variables in your data set and kind of put something up on a poster board, or are you designing something that is going to make it easy and correctly understood and interpreted by the person that looks at it quickly to make an important decision? A little segue or a little side note, one of the things we talk about a lot in our work is preventing questions. And that doesn't mean questions are amazing, but it's more of, if I know there's a lot of theory on elegance and parsimony and data visualizations, but when we're working with clients who often are using our data visualizations or our reports as the single source of truth, if you give a percent, and you don't give a percentage, or you don't explain what a rate is, if you don't get those basic details right, I'll tell you, we've gotten in trouble before because people have read it into the press record incorrectly because of interpretation. So if you can clearly help people not have questions about how to interpret things, I know that's a big ask, but I know y'all as social scientists know how to do that with your data, with your reporting and data visualizations. I want to echo, I think, our firm specializes in hiring people with either a PhD or a clinical degree, or some other kind of a terminal degree that has subject matter expertise, because we bill as not just data scientists, but subject matter experts, so that we can be in those executive decision meetings. Being able to show who you're applying to an industry job for, that you have had some kind of collaborative and not necessarily academic experience, is helpful. And I know that that can be really challenging, don't I know it, to manage during, your academic studies, even if it is a 1-month internship, or even if it is a just side project that is at a slower pace or is, on a back burner, but shows that maybe you're collaborating with somebody that isn't just in your pool of academics to answer questions. That's really helpful because of those things I know that we all know how to do, but it's evidence of the professionalization, operating in a work culture that might be different than academia. I could go into the differences, but I know we're out of time. I want to kick it at least up on my screen to Sam.
So the question was how to pursue both at the same time, which is, I guess, my life in a nutshell. Because I'm pursuing both at the same time, I have a academic and a non-academic career path that I would pursue in either direction. And then I mentioned, so the federal career path I would probably pursue, I think, would be continuing at SAMHSA for a period. And then I think a long-term thing I'd be interested in would be to be a science officer at NIH. So that would be kind of the non-academic goal. How to pursue it both at the same time. I mean, I think a lot of the things that Emily mentioned it would be hard to spend that much time on those things and to pursue the academic side at the same time. I wouldn't be willing to do that, frankly. But that's definitely the best way to pursue non-academic work, just to do what Emily said, I think, which are the exclusive non-academic industry type things. Federal is much less of you don't have to do that stuff as much. I think federal jobs tend to be, they tend to just flat out prestige more, which is also academia. So if you can show you're kind of prestigiously looking, and just show that you're like really smart, sort of in a blunt way, but also be humble. It'll help you in both things. So if you can find some way to balance the humility and I'm a very smart person and I also work really fast all at the same time, and just show that succinctly, that's probably the best way to get any of these jobs. It'll give you less leverage in private sector. But if it's private sector, like that's more academic-y leaning, then that might work too. Like a place like the Grand or RTI, something like that will work well. But the further away you move from academia, that won't work as well. But definitely, like, I think the just general, like, I'm smart, work fast, finish things, that applies everywhere. And as long as you're able to like explain it, how it applies, that works well. If you, again, in federal government, you're not trying to produce money. So like, I think a lot of things that Emily's talking about, those are like applying to how to be a money producer. And then like what Laura's talking about with grants, you don't apply for grants in federal government, you give out grants. So like, you can cut that out of the equation for federal jobs. So like the quality of your work is really the priority in, I think, a good federal agency. So can you produce good work? Can you do it quickly enough? Like if someone's going to email you to do something, are you going to actually respond? Like, yeah. So I would say think more broadly about like how to succinctly show I work fast. I am very smart. I know my things. I can show you a little bit of prestige things that signal all the good stuff you like in an employee.
If I can just add to any of this, I think it's really important to just have as many conversations as you can with people who are working in different industries so that you can get a sense of what it is that you like. And don't feel shy about sending out an email to these people. They would be happy to talk to you. And yeah, just ask them a little bit about their job, what got them there, and a lot of similar questions that you heard today. The other thing that I highly recommend too is to kind of get some training. There's so many fellowships and training opportunities that you can apply for. Like, for example, one that I did was from the Population Research Bureau, and it was about policy communication. It was such a great training program, and you meet other researchers from other institutions, you get potential opportunities to collaborate. But that's another way where you can kind of really dive into the field and figure out what it might be like to work at like a research institute or at like a nonprofit or for a federal position. It's a little bit harder to get insight into what it's like to work for a private company because they're so different and individual. But again, it's just really reaching out to people and asking them to like sit down and have a coffee with you and asking them about their work and just, yeah, be relentless. Just send out those emails and ask them to hang out and invite them out to coffee or a Zoom meeting or something. And just don't feel bad about it because they really will appreciate that time with you. Yeah, I wouldn't hesitate to do that. We are almost out of time. Do you have any other questions? Does anybody have one remaining question?
One practical tip again, I don't have these at my fingertips, so sorry, I'm going to say this and not be able to offer the resources, but there are Reddit subreddits and probably a Discord that are specifically for alternative careers for academics. So if you're a little bit shy and don't want to email people, I would jump on those and then you can just kind of lurk around for a while and maybe post a question. I probably can dig them up at some point or if somebody knows of these, but yeah, there's a bunch of online communities out there that you can just jump on and lurk around and hear what people have to say. Just great for us introverts who don't feel comfortable emailing people. It's nice to be able to lurk in these online spaces for a while, but I don't know, Sam, if you know any of these, but there's definitely a subreddit specifically for that. And then there is, yeah, alt academic on Twitter. There's hashtags you can follow. Absolutely. And then the hashtag, if you follow those hashtags, they'll often link to like maybe a Discord server or Slack that they have communities on. So that's a really, really nice place. And then it doesn't take much time, you can just kind of get the vibe and see what people say, and that will be helpful.
Yeah, and you're welcome to email me too. I'm happy to put you in contact with people. And I was also a sociologist, PhD at FSU. I'm not sure which your institutions are, but I'm pretty sure one of you is from FSU. But yes, you're welcome to email me too. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I am going to call it an end here. And thank you, panelists, so much for your time. Thank you so much. I
so
will
much
reach
for
out to you here shortly with next steps. And yeah, thank you, everybody.